This is the complete story of Persephone's descent into the underworld. And before we begin this journey together, if you find yourself drawn into these ancient tales, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight, what season it is where you are, and whether you're here to drift into sleep or to awaken something deeper. Now, dim the lights, settle in, and let us return to a time when gods walked among mortals and the earth itself could split open to swallow spring whole. The world before. Long before the earth knew winter, there existed a world of perpetual spring. The fields stretched golden with grain. The meadows bloomed with flowers that never faded, and the trees bore fruit in endless abundance. This was the domain of Demeter, the great goddess of agriculture and fertility, she who makes the green things grow. Demeter was not like the other Olympians who spent their days in schemes and petty jealousies atop their mountain throne. She was a goddess of the earth, of soil and seed, of the patient work of growth and harvest. Her hands knew the texture of good earth. Her breath carried the scent of ripe wheat and blooming grains. Where she walked, life followed. Barley pushed up through soil, grapevines heavy with fruit bent their branches low, and fruit trees offered their bounty without stint. But of all the gifts Demeter had given the world, of all the wonders she had cultivated from the generous earth, none was more precious to her than her daughter. Kor, they called her, which simply means the maiden, though we know her better by the name she would earn in darkness, Persephone. Persephone was everything her mother could have hoped for. Young, radiant, with laughter like the sound of wind through spring wheat, and eyes that reflected every color of the blooming meadows. She moved through the world with an innocence that even the gods found captivating, untouched by the cynicism and cruelty that marked so much of divine existence. She spent her days in the company of the Oceanids, the daughters of the great ocean Oceanus, who danced through flower-strewn fields, singing songs that made the very earth rejoice. Demeter watched her daughter with a love that bordered on possession. She kept Persephone close, rejecting every god who came seeking the maiden's hand. Apollo, god of light and prophecy, had offered his suit and been refused. Hermes, the swift-footed messenger, had been turned away. Demeter would not share her daughter with anyone, especially not with the scheming, faithless gods of Olympus, who saw beauty only as something to be conquered and possessed. Mother and daughter existed in a perfect circle of two. Demeter teaching Persephone the mysteries of growing things, showing her how seeds split and push toward light, how roots drink deep from the earth, how the careful tending of field and orchard could feed entire civilizations. They were inseparable, two faces of the same divine force, the mother who makes things grow and the daughter who embodies the eternal renewal of spring. But perfection, as the Greeks understood better than anyone, invites catastrophe. The very completeness of their bond would become the seed of its destruction. For in the shadowed depths beneath the earth, another god watched and wanted what he saw. The conspiracy beneath Olympus Hades was the eldest son of Kronos and Rhea, brother to Zeus and Poseidon, one of the three great gods who had overthrown the Titans and divided the cosmos among themselves. Zeus had claimed the sky and become king of the gods. Poseidon had taken the seas and all the waters of the world, and Hades, eldest but cursed by the drawing of lots, had been given the underworld, the vast kingdom of the dead that stretched beneath all the lands of the living. It was a realm of shadows and silence, of rivers that flowed with mourning and memory, of endless fields where the shades of the dead wandered like smoke. Hades ruled it absolutely, a king with countless subjects, but no companions. He rarely left his kingdom. When he did venture to the surface, it was usually to inspect some boundary of his realm or to ensure that the natural order of death was being properly maintained. But on one such journey to the world above, Hades saw her. Persephone, gathering flowers in a meadow, surrounded by her companions, laughing at something one of the ocean nymphs had said. Sunlight caught in her hair and made it shine like summer wheat. Her movements were grace itself, and when she smiled, even the flowers seemed to bloom brighter. Hades felt something he had never experienced in all his eons of existence. Not mere desire, though that was certainly part of it, but a desperate, aching loneliness. He returned to his dark kingdom, but the image of the maiden in the sunlit meadow haunted him. His vast palace felt emptier than it ever had. The throne beside his own sat vacant, a constant reminder that he alone among the great gods ruled without a queen. The Lord of the Dead had fallen in love with the spirit of spring itself. But Hades was not a fool. He knew Demeter's protective nature. He knew she would never consent to her daughter marrying the god of death, descending into the sunless world below to reign over the departed. So Hades did what any god would do when faced with an obstacle. He went to Zeus. Zeus, king of the gods, receiver of sacrifice, arbiter of divine affairs, listened to his brother's plea. Hades spoke of his loneliness, of the fitness of such a match. Persephone was, after all, Zeus's own daughter, conceived in one of his many unions with Demeter. Zeus saw the logic in the arrangement. One brother wanted a wife, another brother had a daughter. The political alliance would strengthen bonds between the underworld and Olympus. And besides, Zeus had never been one to let a mother's wishes stand in the way of divine matchmaking. So Zeus gave his consent. But he also gave his brother counsel. Demeter would never agree to the marriage. She would fight with every fiber of her considerable power to keep her daughter from the realm of death. The only way Hades could claim his bride was through force, through abduction, and Zeus, in his infinite capacity for avoiding personal responsibility, suggested he would simply look the other way when it happened. But for such a plan to work, Persephone would need to be lured away from her overprotective mother's watchful eye. This was where Gaia entered the conspiracy. The earth itself, the ancient primordial goddess from whom all things spring, agreed to help. Whether she did so out of favor to her grandson Hades, or because she saw in this union some deeper necessity of the cosmic order, the myths do not clearly say. What is clear is that Gaia caused a special flower to grow in a particular meadow. Not just any flower, but a narcissus of surpassing beauty. In some versions of the tale, the narcissus grew with 100 blooms on a single stalk, each one more perfect and fragrant than anything that had ever grown on earth before. It was calculated to entrance, to draw any who saw it close, to make them reach out their hand without thinking. It was, quite literally, a trap made of beauty. And every god involved in the conspiracy knew it. Zeus knew. Hades knew. Gaia certainly knew. But the maiden who would be drawn to pluck it, she knew nothing at all. The meadow of flowers. The day it happened was perfect. The sort of day that exists in memory as crystalline and pure, untouched by any shadow of what was to come. Persephone had set out with her companions, the daughters of Oceanus. The ancient hymn names some of them: Leucippe and Phano, Electra and Ianthe, Melite and Iac, Rhodia and Calirrhoas, and many others besides. These nymphs, the Oceanids, were her constant playmates and companions. The meadow where they gathered was the sort of place that poets dream about and artists try to capture. In the warm sunlight of a world that had not yet known autumn, Flowers bloomed in impossible profusion. Roses climbed over gentle slopes, their petals so deep red they seemed to hold all the passion of creation within them. Crocuses pushed up through grass like purple flames. Violets spread in carpets of softest blue. Irises lifted their heads on tall stalks, regal as any plant that ever grew. Hyacinths filled the air with a perfume that made even the gods pause and breathe deeply. Lilies, pure as untouched snow, nodded in the breeze. Persephone moved among them like a spirit of joy made flesh. She wove flowers into crowns for her companions. She laughed at their jests and sang with them songs of the simple pleasure of being young and alive in a world abundant with beauty. This was her element, her truest self. Here among growing things in the light of the sun. She gathered armfuls of blooms, choosing the most perfect specimens, planning to surprise her mother with an offering of beauty. But then she saw it. At the edge of the meadow, growing apart from all the other flowers, there bloomed the narcissus that Gaia had made at Zeus's command. Even from a distance, it called to her. Its color was unlike any flower she had ever seen, somehow managing to be pale as dawn and brilliant as midday sun at the same time. Its perfume drifted to her on the breeze, and it smelled of promises, of secrets waiting to be discovered, of mysteries that lay just beyond knowing. Persephone drifted away from her companions, drawn by that intoxicating scent, by the perfection of those 100 blooms swaying on their single stalk. The Oceanids, absorbed in their own gathering and games, didn't notice at first that the maiden had wandered from their circle. Or perhaps they too were part of the plan, distracted by divine will, so that this moment could unfold exactly as the gods had designed it. Persephone reached out her hand toward the narcissus. Her fingers brushed those perfect petals, and in that instant, the world changed forever. The earth beneath her feet began to tremble. At first, it was just a shiver, as though something vast had stirred in its sleep far below. But then, the trembling became a shaking, became a convulsion that split the very ground itself. The meadow tore open with a sound like thunder and breaking stone. A chasm yawned before Persephone, darkness pouring up from depths that should never see the light of day. And from that darkness came a chariot. Black horses with eyes like dying stars pulled it, their hooves striking sparks from the fractured earth. The chariot itself seemed made of shadow and precious metals, and standing in it, reins wrapped around his powerful hands, was Hades himself. The Lord of the Dead had come to claim his bride. Persephone had time for one scream. It tore from her throat, a sound of pure terror and shock, and she called out for the only one she thought could save her. Not her mother, perhaps because in that moment of ultimate crisis, some part of her still believed in the ultimate authority of the Father. "Zeus!" she cried. "Father, save me!" But Zeus, safe on Olympus and receiving offerings from mortals, did not respond. He had placed himself deliberately beyond hearing, beyond responsibility for what he had set in motion. Hades reached down with arms strong as earthquake and lifted Persephone into his chariot. She fought him, struggled against his grip. But what chance does spring have against death? He was implacable, inevitable, and she was in his grasp. The chariot wheeled around, the black horses plunging back toward that opening in the earth, and Persephone screamed again and again, her voice echoing across the meadow, across the mountains, across the seas themselves. But almost no one heard. The Oceanids, her playmates and companions, saw nothing. One moment, Persephone had been there. The next, she was simply gone, vanished, as though she had never existed at all. They would later speak of their confusion, their growing fear as they realized the maiden was nowhere to be found. But in the moment of the abduction itself, they were blind and deaf to it. Only two heard Persephone's cries. Hecate, goddess of crossroads and thresholds and things that happen between one state and another, was in her cave when the maiden's screams rang out. She heard them clearly, but saw nothing of who had taken the girl. And Helios, the titan who drives the chariot of the sun across the sky each day and sees all that happens in the world below, he witnessed everything, but neither intervened. Hecate did not have the power, and Helios, seeing that this was a matter between the great gods, wisely chose to remain silent. The earth closed behind Hades' chariot with a sound like a final door slamming shut. The meadow smoothed over as though it had never been disturbed. Only the narcissus remained, that perfect trap of a flower, still swaying gently in the breeze, its 100 blooms undisturbed. And scattered around where the chasm had opened, the flowers Persephone had been gathering lay trampled and forgotten, already beginning to wilt in the warm sun. Demeter had been tending the fields when it happened, working her divine influence through the ripening grain, ensuring that the harvest would be abundant, that no family would know hunger in the coming year. This was her purpose, her joy, the work that gave meaning to her existence. But suddenly, she felt something wrong, a disturbance, like a discordant note in a perfect song, like a flaw in the fabric of the world itself. And then, faint but unmistakable, she heard it. Her daughter's voice, raised in terror, calling out a name. Zeus. Zeus. The sound of it struck Demeter like a physical blow. She abandoned her work immediately, everything forgotten, but the terrible certainty that her daughter was in danger. Demeter raced to the meadow, divine power making her swift as thought. But even at such speed, she was too late. The Oceanids clustered together in confusion, frightened and babbling. Persephone was gone, simply gone. The nymphs had explanations that explained nothing, theories that contradicted each other. She had been with them, and then she wasn't. No one had seen her leave. No one had heard anything unusual. It was as though the earth had simply swallowed the maiden whole. Which, of course, was exactly what had happened. Demeter questioned them all, but they had nothing useful to tell her. So she began to search. And what began as a search would stretch into an ordeal that would nearly destroy the world itself. For 9 days, Demeter wandered the earth. She held 2 torches, one in each hand, and their flames never went out, burning with a light fueled by a mother's desperation. She walked every road, searched every valley, questioned every creature she encountered. Gods and mortals alike shrank from the fury and grief they saw in her eyes. She did not eat. She did not rest. She did not bathe or tend to herself in any way. Her golden hair hung wild and unkempt. Her divine robes became stained with dust and torn by thorns. But none of that mattered. Only finding Persephone mattered. She asked everyone she met if they had seen her daughter, described the maiden's beauty, begged for any scrap of information. But no one knew anything. Or if they did, they were too frightened to tell. Because those who had witnessed the abduction, those who understood what had truly happened, knew that it had been done with Zeus's blessing, and who would dare contradict the will of the king of the gods? On the 10th day, as dawn was breaking, Demeter encountered Hecate. The goddess of the crossroads carried a torch of her own, and her face was grave with knowledge and sorrow. "Great Demeter," Hecate said, her voice gentle with sympathy. "I heard your daughter's voice. I heard her cry out in fear and pain, but I did not see who took her, only that she was taken. I am sorry. If I had been there, if I had seen. But Hecate suggested that there was one who had seen everything. Helios, who sees all that happens beneath the sky, would surely know what had become of Persephone. Together, the two goddesses went to find the Titan who drives the sun's chariot. They stood in his path, forcing him to halt his coursing across the heavens, the horses of his chariot snorting and stamping as Helios reined them in. "All-seeing Helios," Demeter pleaded, her voice breaking with exhaustion and grief. "If you have any regard for me, if ever you have appreciated the grain that feeds the mortals who worship you, tell me what you saw. Tell me what happened to my daughter." Helios looked down at her with eyes that held infinite compassion, but also infinite weariness. He had seen so much in his endless journeying across the sky, so much joy and so much sorrow. And now he had to deliver news he knew would break this goddess completely. "Demeter," he said carefully, "your daughter has been taken to the underworld. Hades, lord of the dead, seized her and carried her to his realm to be his bride. And this was done with the permission of Zeus, her father, and your former consort. The maiden is now queen of the dead, wife to the one who rules the shades and shadows below." He tried to soften the blow, tried to counsel her toward acceptance. "Do not grieve so terribly," Helios said. "Hades is not an unworthy husband. He is a great god, brother to Zeus himself, and he will treat your daughter with the honor due a queen. Many would consider this a good match." But his words of comfort landed like blows. Demeter stood frozen, the torches falling from her numb hands. Permission. Zeus had given permission. Her daughter's own father had conspired in her abduction. And Hades, that grim lord of the dead, had stolen spring itself down into his joyless realm. The grief that swept through Demeter in that moment was larger than mere personal loss. It was the grief of every mother who has lost a child, every soul who has known violation, every being who has seen innocence destroyed by the selfish desires of the powerful. And mixed with that grief was a rage so pure and terrible that it would shake the very foundations of the world. Demeter did not return to Olympus. She could not bear to look upon the faces of the gods who had betrayed her, who had conspired to take her daughter, who even now probably thought she should simply accept what had been done and move on. Instead, she wrapped herself in the guise of mortality and descended into the world of humans. Using her divine power, Demeter transformed herself into an old woman. Not just any old woman, but the specific kind that would be most invisible, most overlooked in the world of men. She became elderly and bent, her divine beauty hidden behind the wrinkles of apparent age, her golden hair now gray and thin. She looked like a woman past childbearing, past desire, past any usefulness except perhaps as a servant or nurse. The kind of woman that people's eyes slide past without really seeing. In this guise, she called herself Doso, and she wandered aimlessly, letting grief guide her footsteps. Eventually, those steps brought her to the city of Eleusis in Attica, about 20 miles northwest of Athens. It was an unremarkable place, a small settlement surrounded by fertile plains, the sort of place where farmers brought their grain and craftsmen plied their trades, and life continued in the simple, ancient patterns that had sustained communities since humans first learned to plant seeds. Demeter came to the edge of the city and sat down to rest beside a well. It was called the Maiden Well, though she did not know that then, and the irony of it would only strike her later. She sat in the shade of an olive tree, wrapped in her disguise, and for the first time since Persephone had been taken, she allowed herself to simply stop. The grief washed over her in waves, and she wept. though no tears fell from those false old eyes. After some time, 4 young women came to the well to draw water. They were daughters of King Celeus of Eleusis, and the Homeric hymn names them Callidice, Cleisidice, Demo, and Callithoi. They moved with the easy confidence of youth and privilege, laughing together, their bronze pitchers gleaming in the sunlight. When they saw the old woman sitting alone by the well, their laughter died. There was something about her that compelled both respect and pity. They approached her gently, asked her who she was and why she sat alone, and did not enter the city where she might find shelter and hospitality. Demeter, still playing her role as Doso the Wanderer, told them a story designed to explain her situation. She said she was from Crete, that she had been captured by pirates who brought her to the mainland, that she had managed to escape but now found herself far from home with nowhere to go. She spoke of her fear, of being alone and unprotected in a dangerous world, and she asked if they knew of any household that might have need of a nurse or servant, someone to care for children or keep house, any work that would give her shelter and bread. The sisters exchanged glances. Callidice, the most forward of them, spoke up. Their mother, Queen Metaneira, had recently given birth to a late child, a son who was the joy of the household. Surely their mother would be grateful for an experienced nurse to help care for the boy. Would Doso wait here while they ran home to ask? Demeter agreed, and the young women raced back to their father's palace with the news. Soon they returned, breathless and excited. Their mother welcomed Doso to come and meet the family, to see the baby, and if all went well, to stay as his nurse. So Demeter followed the sisters back through the gates of Eleusis, through streets she barely saw, to the palace of King Celeus. There she was brought before Queen Metaneira, who sat in the great hall with her infant son in her arms. The queen looked exhausted, as new mothers often do, and when she saw the apparent wisdom and steadiness in old Doso's bearing, she smiled with relief. "You are welcome in this house," Metaneira said. "If you are willing to nurse our son and help care for him, I will see that you want for nothing. He is precious to us, this late child, this unexpected blessing." Demeter agreed, though everything in her wanted to scream, to tear off her disguise and demand the gods return what had been stolen from her. But she pushed that desire down. Here, at least, was purpose. Here was an infant who needed care, a mother who needed help. It was not her own child, but it was something, some small thread of meaning to cling to in a world that had gone dark. They gave her a simple stool to sit on, spread with a fleece, and brought her before the household. But Demeter sat in silence, her face hidden by her veil, refusing all food and drink. She remained wrapped in her grief, barely acknowledging the family around her. It was a servant woman named Iambe who finally broke through. She was known in the household for her sharp wit and bawdy humor, and seeing this strange old woman sitting in silent misery, Iambe did what she did best. She told jokes, obscene ones, the kind that would make proper people blush and improper people laugh. She made crude gestures, spoke of bodily functions and earthly pleasures with a frankness that was both shocking and somehow liberating. And despite everything, despite the weight of grief that pressed down on her like the whole sky, Demeter smiled. Then she laughed. Just a little, just enough to remind herself that laughter still existed in the world. It was not healing, not really, but it was a momentary respite, and she was grateful for it. When they offered her wine, she refused it. Wine was for celebration, and she had nothing to celebrate. Instead, she asked for a simple drink, barley water mixed with mint and honey. They prepared it for her, and she drank it. This simple act, This consumption of the humble kykeon would later become one of the most sacred elements of the mysteries that would be established in this very place. And so Demeter became the nurse to Demophoon, the infant son of Celeus and Metaneira. By day, she cared for him as any nurse would, but she also did more. She anointed him with ambrosia, the food of the gods, and breathed sweetly upon him, lending him some measure of divine protection. The child thrived beyond all normal measure, growing stronger and more beautiful than any mortal child had right to be. But it was at night that Demeter did her most extraordinary work. When the household slept, when no mortal eyes could see, she would take the child and place him directly in the fire of the hearth. Because she was a goddess, the flames did not burn him. Instead, they burned away his mortality, slowly transforming him into something more than human. Night after night, she performed this ritual, intending to make the child immortal, to give the family who had shown her kindness a gift beyond all measure. Their son would never know death, never know decay, would live forever, young and strong. It might have worked, too. But Metaneira, like many mothers, was naturally curious about her child. One night, she woke and went to check on the baby. And there, in the dying light of the fire, she saw old Dozo holding her infant son in the flames. Metaneira screamed, a mother's scream of pure terror, seeing what looked like certain death for her beloved child. She rushed forward, snatched the baby from Demeter's hands, checked him frantically for burns or injury, and that scream, that interruption, that moment of mortal fear, broke the spell entirely. Demeter had been moments away from completing her work, from granting true immortality to this child. But now, that could never be. The ritual had been violated, the magic shattered. The goddess's grief turned to anger, hot, terrible anger at yet another thing stolen from her, another act of creation interrupted and destroyed. In that moment, she dropped her disguise. The old woman's form fell away like a shed skin, and there stood Demeter in all her divine glory. Light poured from her, brighter than any flame, filling the palace with radiance that made mortal eyes water. Her golden hair streamed down her back, and the air filled with the scent of wheat and earth and growing things. Metaneira fell back, terrified, clutching her baby to her chest. "Foolish mortals," Demeter said, her voice resonating with power and rage. "You understand nothing. I would have made your son deathless and unaging, would have given him eternal honor and youth. But now, thanks to your ignorance, that can never be. He will live, but he will die like all mortals do. Though I promise you this much, because he lay in my arms and received my blessing, he will always be held in high esteem. The sons of Eleusis will remember him with honor." The household was in chaos, family and servants rushing in at the commotion, dropping to their knees before the revealed goddess. They begged for forgiveness, wept with fear at having angered such a power. But Demeter's anger had already begun to cool, replaced once more by that crushing grief. "Build me a temple," she commanded. "There, on the hill outside the city. Build me a temple and an altar, and I will teach you my rites. I will show you how to honor me properly." And with that, she vanished from their sight, leaving the household in shocked silence, the baby Demophoon unharmed but still merely mortal, and a divine command hanging in the air like smoke. King Celeus called an assembly of all the people of Eleusis the very next morning. He stood before them, still shaken by the appearance of the goddess, and told them what had happened, what she had commanded. And the people, understanding that the favor of the gods was not something to be taken lightly, set to work immediately. They built the temple exactly where Demeter had specified, on a hill overlooking the plains of Eleusis. It was not the grandest temple in Greece, but it was built with care and devotion, every stone placed with reverence, every timber chosen with thought for pleasing the goddess. When it was complete, Demeter took up residence there, withdrawing from both Olympus and the world of mortals, wrapping herself in her grief like a cloak. And then she did something that would shake the foundations of existence itself. She stopped. Simply stopped. The goddess of agriculture, she who makes all green things grow, withdrew her blessing from the earth entirely. At first, the changes were subtle. Farmers noticed their fields seemed a little less vital, the green shoots pushing up from the soil with less vigor than usual. Gardeners commented that their vegetables were taking longer to ripen. But these were small things, easily dismissed as natural variation in the growing season. The mortals did not yet understand what was coming, but the earth knew. The soil itself felt the absence of its patron goddess. Seeds that should have split and sprouted lay dormant in the ground. Buds that should have opened remained closed and tight. The vital force that drives growth, that pulls water and nutrients up through roots and into stems and leaves, that force simply ceased to flow. Within weeks, the fields began to fail. Not slowly, not gradually, but with terrifying speed. Plants that had been green and thriving suddenly yellowed and withered. Grain that should have been approaching harvest instead bent and broke, stalks collapsing as though the life had been sucked out of them. Fruit trees dropped their immature fruit and stood bare and skeletal even in what should have been the height of summer. Grapevines, those hardy plants that could grow almost anywhere, shriveled on their trellises. The animals were next to suffer. Cattle and sheep, finding no grass to graze, began to starve. Their ribs showed through their hides. Their eyes grew dull and hopeless. Chickens stopped laying. Goats gave no milk. The world that had always been abundant with life began to empty. And then the people began to die. Slowly at first, the very young and the very old, those most vulnerable to hunger. But as the famine deepened, as every stored grain was consumed and nothing new grew to replace it, death came for everyone. Families watched their children waste away, unable to do anything to save them. The elderly ended their own lives to spare their grandchildren one more mouth to feed. Entire villages became ghost towns, as people either perished or fled in desperate search of food that no longer existed anywhere. The earth itself took on a terrible aspect. The rich, dark soil that farmers loved to work became gray and lifeless, blowing away in dust storms that choked and blinded. Rivers ran, but carried no life, their waters empty of fish. The sea itself seemed to draw back from the shore, as though even the ocean mourned what was happening to the land. And still, Demeter sat in her temple at Eleusis, wrapped in her grief, feeling nothing for the suffering she was causing, or perhaps feeling it all too keenly, but believing that her pain was greater than any other pain in the world. Her daughter was in the underworld, married to death itself, lost to her forever. Why should the world go on? Why should there be life and joy and abundance when her own life held only emptiness? The gods on Olympus began to feel the crisis in a way that even they could not ignore. Mortals stopped making offerings. How could they, when they had no grain to spare, no wine to pour, no cattle to sacrifice? The altars grew cold and empty. The temples fell silent. And gods, for all their power and immortality, depend on worship. They feed on the prayers and sacrifices of mortals, and now that sustenance was drying up as surely as the fields below. Zeus, watching his fellow gods grow anxious and irritable from the lack of offerings, finally understood that something would have to be done. He sent messenger after messenger to Demeter, pleading with her to restore her blessing to the earth. He sent Iris of the golden wings. He sent the Graces, who could charm anyone. He sent gods and goddesses of all ranks and domains, each bearing promises of gifts and honors, if only Demeter would relent. But she refused them all. Each divine messenger who came to her temple was turned away with the same answer: "Bring me back my daughter, and the earth will bloom again. Until Persephone returns to me, until I hold her in my arms and know she is safe, nothing will grow. Not one seed will split. Not one blade of grass will push up through the soil. Let the world starve. Let the gods go without worship. I care nothing for any of it." Her rage was not hot and explosive. It was cold and absolute. The rage of a mother whose trust has been utterly destroyed, whose love has been weaponized against her. Zeus had used her daughter, her greatest treasure, as a pawn in his political games among the gods. And now Zeus and all of Olympus would pay the price for that betrayal. The crisis deepened. Seasons should have changed, but they didn't. Time seemed frozen in the moment of Demeter's grief. The world hung suspended in a state of death without end, suffering without relief. Some mortals prayed for death to end their misery, but even death seemed reluctant to take them, as though the natural order itself had been disrupted by what was happening. Finally, Zeus understood that he had no choice. The world could not continue like this. Humanity would be utterly destroyed, and with them would go the worship and honor due to the gods. And beyond the practical concerns, even Zeus, for all his flaws, could see that what he had done was wrong. He had given his daughter to Hades without consulting her mother, without considering Persephone's own wishes. He had treated both goddess and maiden as property to be dispensed with as he saw fit. So Zeus did something he rarely did. He admitted, at least to himself, that he had made a terrible mistake, and he prepared to do what he could to fix it. While the world above descended into famine and death, Persephone existed in a realm where death was the natural state of all things. The underworld into which Hades had carried her was vast beyond mortal comprehension, a kingdom that stretched beneath all the lands of the living, a mirror world of shadow and memory. The geography of this realm was strange and terrible. At its entrance, the river Styx wound its way, black water flowing with currents that whispered of oaths and binding promises. This was the river by which the gods themselves swore, because an oath sworn on the Styx could never be broken. Beyond it lay the river Acheron, the river of woe, where the newly dead gathered to wait for Charon, the ancient ferryman who would carry them across in his boat in exchange for a coin placed in their mouths at burial. There was the river Lethe, whose waters brought forgetfulness, allowing the dead to release their memories of life and pass peacefully into eternity. The river Phlegethon, made of fire rather than water, circled the realm like a burning barrier. And the river Cocytus, the river of lamentation, where those who could not pay Charon's fee were condemned to wander forever on its banks, neither truly in the underworld nor able to return to life. Hades' palace stood at the heart of this realm, carved from darkness itself and precious metals that never saw the sun. Obsidian and onyx made up its walls, veined with gold and silver that gleamed in the perpetual twilight. The halls were vast and echoing, filled with a silence that was not quite peaceful, more like the held breath before something terrible happens. This was where Persephone found herself. Hades did not chain her. He did not lock her in a dungeon or treat her with overt cruelty. In his own way, the Lord of the Dead tried to be kind to his new queen. He showed her the wonders of his realm, the fields of asphodel, where most souls wandered in pale contentment, neither happy nor sad, but simply existing. He showed her Elysium, the blessed isles where the heroic dead feasted and sang. He even showed her Tartarus, though from a distance, where the worst of the wicked suffered eternal punishment. But kindness from a captor is still captivity. Persephone was a prisoner, however gilded her cage might be. She refused to eat, refused to drink, refused to accept her new role. She wandered the palace like a ghost herself, trying to find some exit, some way back to the world of light and life, and her mother's love. Hades was patient. He had all of eternity, after all. He spoke to her gently, tried to help her understand that she was his wife now, that this was her home, that she would come to appreciate the quiet majesty of his kingdom. He told her she would be honored as his queen, that all the dead would bow before her, that she would wield power second only to his own. But Persephone wanted none of it. She wanted the sun on her face and flowers in her hands and her mother's voice calling her home. She wanted to dance with the oceanids and chase butterflies through blooming meadows. She wanted life, not this pale shadow existence where nothing grew and nothing changed, and everything that arrived had already ended. Time in the underworld was strange. It didn't flow the way it did above. Days and nights had no meaning in a place where the sun never shone. Persephone couldn't tell if she had been there for weeks or months or years. It all blurred together into one endless twilight of grief and longing. But she learned things too. Despite her misery, despite her desperate homesickness, Persephone began to understand the underworld in ways that even Hades did not expect. She spoke with the dead, listened to their stories, heard the regrets and sorrows that bound them to their former lives. She saw the judgment of souls, watched as Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus weighed each life and determined its destination. And she began to feel something unexpected: compassion. These souls, so lost and confused, arriving in a place they had been taught to fear, they needed someone to help them, someone to show mercy. Hades was just, but he was not particularly merciful. He enforced the laws of death without favor or feeling. But Persephone, still carrying within her the warmth and empathy of the spring, found herself wanting to ease their transition, to offer comfort to those who had none. In some versions of the story, this is when Hades made his fatal mistake. Seeing that Persephone seemed to be adjusting, seemed perhaps to be finding her place in his realm, he thought he could cement her position by offering her food. Or perhaps he simply tricked her, catching her in a moment of weakness, when her hunger had grown too great to ignore any longer. The fruit was a pomegranate, ripe and red, its leathery skin split to reveal the jewel-like seeds within, each one glistening with juice. In the underworld where nothing grew, where no life could take root, the pomegranate seemed like a miracle. And Persephone, who had not eaten since her abduction, who had grown weak and pale from her fast, felt her resistance crumbling. She took the pomegranate, held it in her hands. The weight of it felt real in a way that nothing else in the underworld did. And she ate. Not much, not the whole fruit, just the seeds. Different ancient sources preserve different versions of how many seeds she consumed. The Homeric hymn to Demeter our oldest source for the myth, speaks simply of a pomegranate seed that Hades secretly placed in her mouth. Later authors elaborated on the number. Some traditions say she ate 3 seeds, others say 4. The most widespread version says 6, which came to explain the division of her year between 2 realms. But the exact number mattered less than the act itself, because there was a law in the underworld, ancient and immutable. Anyone who consumed food or drink in the realm of the dead was bound to that realm forever. They could never truly leave, never return fully to the world of the living. By eating those pomegranate seeds, Persephone had sealed her own fate. Whether she knew this when she ate them remains a mystery preserved in the ancient texts themselves. The Homeric hymn to Demeter describes how Hades secretly placed in her mouth a honey-sweet pomegranate seed and compelled her to eat it against her will, suggesting trickery. Some versions suggest she was innocent of the consequences. Others imply she knew exactly what she was doing, that some part of her had begun to accept her role as queen and wanted to make that acceptance binding. Still, other versions suggest something more complex, that Persephone was transforming into something new, something that existed between life and death. Death, spring and winter, maiden and queen, and the pomegranate was simply the physical expression of that transformation. What is certain is that she ate, and everything that followed came from that single act. But Persephone was not alone when she ate those fatal seeds. In the gardens of Hades, among the strange plants that grew without sunlight, lived a minor spirit named Ascalaphus. He was the son of the river Acheron and the nymph Orphne, and he served as a gardener in the underworld, tending the ghostly plants that existed in that twilight realm. Ascalaphus witnessed Persephone eating the pomegranate seeds, and when Hermes arrived as Zeus's messenger to bring Persephone back to the world above, when Hades was forced to release his queen because the earth was dying, and even the Lord of the Dead could see that something must be done, Ascalaphus spoke up. "She cannot leave," he declared before the assembled powers. "The maiden has eaten food from the underworld. She consumed 6 seeds of the pomegranate. The law is clear. She is bound to this realm forever." Demeter, who had just been reunited with her daughter, who had just begun to feel the first stirrings of joy after so long consumed by grief, heard these words and felt her heart shatter all over again. She had thought she would get Persephone back, thought the nightmare was ending. But now this minor spirit, this nothing of a being, was telling her that her daughter must remain in the underworld because of some technicality, some ancient law. Her rage was instantaneous and terrible. She looked at Ascalaphus with eyes that held the fury of every failed crop, every starved child, every empty field, and she transformed him. In some versions of the myth, Demeter herself worked this transformation. In others, it was Persephone who later punished the witness. The ancient sources disagree on this detail, but all agree on the result. Ascalaphus was changed into an owl, specifically a screech owl, that bird of ill omen whose cry sounds like a scream in the night. According to some traditions, he was also trapped under a massive boulder in the underworld, condemned to suffer for his honesty, for speaking the truth that had cost Demeter everything once again. Later, according to some versions of the myth, Persephone herself would show mercy to Ascalaphus, releasing him from under the stone, allowing him to fly through the underworld as her messenger. But in that moment, all anyone could feel was the mother's rage and the daughter's despair, and the terrible knowledge that the law Ascalaphus had spoken was true and binding. Zeus, who had witnessed all of this, understood that a compromise would have to be reached. Neither Hades nor Demeter could be completely satisfied, but perhaps a solution could be found that would at least prevent the total destruction of the mortal world. He called all the parties together, Hades, Demeter, and the other great gods of Olympus, and together they hammered out an agreement that would change the nature of the world forever. Because Persephone had eaten food in the underworld, she was bound to it. This could not be changed. The ancient laws that governed the cosmos were not so easily dismissed, not even by Zeus. But she had not eaten an entire meal, had not fully accepted the hospitality of the underworld. She had eaten only seeds, a handful, a small portion. So Zeus declared that Persephone would spend part of each year in the underworld as Hades' queen, and part of each year in the world above with her mother. The Homeric hymn specifies that she would remain in the underworld for 1/3 of the year and spend 2/3 with Demeter and the other gods. Other ancient sources give different divisions, some suggesting an equal split of 6 months in each realm tied to the number of seeds eaten. The variations in the tradition reflect different regional customs and agricultural cycles across the Greek world. It was not what Demeter wanted. It was not what Persephone wanted. But it was the best solution that could be reached without violating the fundamental laws that held the universe together. And so it was agreed. Persephone would spend the warm months, the time of growth and plenty, with her mother in the world of the living. But when autumn came, when the first leaves began to turn, she would descend once more to the underworld to rule as queen beside Hades. And she would remain there through the cold, dark months until spring returned, and she could ascend once more to her mother's embrace. The cycle had been established. The pattern that would govern all of nature from that moment forward had been set. And though neither mother nor daughter would ever be completely happy with the arrangement, though they would spend their time apart in longing and their time together in the shadow of inevitable separation, at least they would have each other for part of the year. It was a grief that could be survived, a loss that could be endured, because now they knew it was not permanent, not eternal, just cyclical, just temporary. Every departure held within it the promise of return. The moment Demeter and Persephone were reunited, truly reunited, with the understanding that Persephone would spend half her time in the world above, the earth responded. It was not a gradual healing, but an explosion of life that swept across the planet like a wave. Seeds that had lain dormant in the dead soil suddenly split and sprouted. Green shoots pushed up through the gray earth with such force that you could almost hear them growing. Trees that had stood bare and skeletal burst into bloom, their branches suddenly heavy with flowers and new leaves. Fields that had been wastelands became carpets of green almost overnight. It was as though the earth itself had been holding its breath, waiting for Demeter's grief to ease, and now exhaled in a rush of renewal and joy. Farmers who had been preparing to die from starvation walked out to find their fields lush with grain, almost ready for harvest. Orchards bore fruit in such abundance that branches broke under the weight. Gardens exploded with vegetables of sizes and flavors never seen before. The famine ended as abruptly as it had begun. The people who had survived the terrible time of death and deprivation fell to their knees in gratitude, understanding that they had witnessed something beyond the normal order of things, something divine and terrible and ultimately merciful. Demeter walked across the earth with her daughter beside her, and everywhere they went, life followed. They moved through villages and cities, through forests and fields, and their presence alone was enough to restore vitality and abundance. The goddess reached down and touched barren ground, and wheat sprang up golden and full. Persephone laughed and pointed at a withered tree, and it bloomed with such profusion that bees came from miles around to drink its nectar. But both of them knew, even in the midst of their joy, that this reunion was temporary, that when autumn came, when the leaves began to turn, Persephone would have to descend once more to the underworld, that Demeter would have to let her go, knowing that this time she would return, but knowing also that the separation would be agony. And so the cycle was established. When Persephone is with her mother in the world above, it is spring and summer. The earth blooms, crops grow, warmth and light fill the world. Demeter is happy, and in her happiness, she blesses all growing things with abundance. This is the time of life, of growth, of plenty. But when Persephone must descend to the underworld to fulfill her role as queen, when she leaves her mother's side to rule beside Hades in the realm of the dead, then Demeter grieves, and in her grief she withdraws her blessing from the earth. Leaves fall from the trees. Plants die back to their roots. The world grows cold and dark. This is autumn and winter, the time of death and dormancy, when the earth sleeps and waits for spring's return. Some versions of the myth say that Persephone herself changed during her time in the underworld, that the innocent maiden who was abducted became something more complex during her months below. She learned to wield power, to command the dead, to judge souls and show mercy or severity as circumstances demanded. She became, in truth, a queen. So when she returns to her mother each spring, she brings with her not just the memory of the underworld, but its wisdom as well. She is no longer purely the maiden of spring, but something more mature, something that understands both life and death, light and darkness. And perhaps this transformation, painful as it was necessary. Perhaps the world needed a goddess who could bridge the gap between life and death, who could understand both realms and mediate between them. Hecate, who had heard Persephone's cries on the day of her abduction, became a constant companion to both mother and daughter. She walked with Persephone when the maiden descended to the underworld, lighting her way with torches, and she greeted her when Persephone returned to the surface, celebrating the renewal of spring. Hecate, goddess of crossroads and thresholds, understood better than most the importance of transitions, of the spaces between one state and another. But Demeter's time at Eleusis had not been wasted. During those dark months when she sat in her temple grieving, when the world starved and she could not bring herself to care, she had been thinking about mortality, about death, about what happens to human souls after they die. She had learned, through her daughter's experience, about the underworld and its workings in ways she had never considered before, and she decided to give humanity a gift. Not just the gift of agriculture, of knowing how to plant and harvest and store grain, though those skills were precious enough, but something more profound. She would teach them mysteries, sacred knowledge about death and what lies beyond it, knowledge that would ease their fear and give them hope. The Eleusinian mysteries, as they came to be known, were established in the city where Demeter had spent her time in disguise. The temple the people had built for her became the center of the most important religious cult in ancient Greece, lasting for nearly 2,000 years, and attracting initiates from all across the Mediterranean world. The mysteries themselves were secret. Initiates swore oaths never to reveal what they had witnessed, what they had been taught, what they had experienced in the sacred rituals. And they kept those oaths so well that even today, thousands of years later, we can only guess at the exact nature of what was revealed. But we know what the mysteries promised, that those who were initiated would face death without fear, would understand that death is not an ending but a transformation, would know that something of them would continue beyond the dissolution of the body. The rituals took place annually, beginning in Athens and culminating at Eleusis. Thousands of people would make the pilgrimage, walking the sacred way between the two cities, carrying torches in memory of Demeter's search for her daughter. The procession would arrive at Eleusis after dark, and there, in the great hall called the Telesterion, the mysteries would be revealed. We know that participants drank the kykion, that barley water mixed with mint that Demeter herself had drunk when she sat grieving in Celeus's hall. We know that there were sacred objects that were displayed, things so holy that even centuries later, when Christianity had supplanted the old religions, people still spoke of them with awe. We know that there were visions, perhaps induced by the kykion if it contained some psychoactive substance, or perhaps simply by the power of ritual and communal experience. And we know that those who experienced the mysteries came away transformed. Ancient writers speak of how initiates faced death calmly, without the terror that gripped the uninitiated. They had been shown something, had understood something, that made death lose its sting. Perhaps it was simply the story of Persephone itself, the understanding that death is not permanent, that what descends will rise again, that winter always gives way to spring. Or perhaps it was something more, some direct experience of the divine that cannot be captured in words. King Celeus's son, Triptolemus, the child Demeter had tried to make immortal, was given a special role in the mysteries. Though he could not be made truly deathless, Demeter blessed him in other ways. She gave him a chariot drawn by serpents, sacred creatures associated with the earth and renewal, and she gave him seeds of wheat and taught him the art of agriculture, then sent him out to travel the world, teaching humanity how to cultivate grain and sustain themselves through farming. Triptolemus became a culture hero, the one who brought civilization through agriculture. In art, he was often depicted in his serpent chariot, holding stalks of wheat, with Demeter and Persephone standing on either side of him, blessing his mission. Because agriculture was not just about feeding the body, but about feeding the soul. The cultivation of grain required patience, planning, and cooperation. It demanded that people settle in one place, build communities, develop laws and traditions. In teaching humanity to farm, Demeter was teaching them to be civilized. The mysteries at Eleusis became central to Greek religious life. To be initiated was considered one of the most important experiences a person could have. Emperors and slaves alike sought initiation, because before the mysteries, all were equal. Death comes for everyone, and the hope of something beyond death was precious to all. Even when Christianity began to spread through the Roman Empire, even as the old gods were abandoned and their temples closed, the Eleusinian mysteries persisted. They continued to be celebrated, continued to attract initiates, because what they offered was too valuable to let go. It was not until 392 CE, when the Emperor Theodosius ordered the destruction of all pagan temples, that the mysteries finally ended, after nearly 2,000 years of continuous practice. The sacred buildings were destroyed, the rituals forbidden, the priesthoods disbanded. But the story remained. The story of Demeter and Persephone, of a mother's love and a daughter's transformation, of death and renewal, of the eternal cycle of the seasons. That story could not be destroyed because it was written into the very fabric of the world. And so the pattern was set, unchanging and eternal. Every year, as summer reaches its peak, Persephone begins to prepare for her descent. The days grow shorter. There is a subtle shift in the quality of the light, a sense of things winding down, preparing for rest. And on a day known only to the two goddesses themselves, Persephone says goodbye to her mother. and makes her way to one of the many entrances to the underworld. Demeter watches her go, and though she knows her daughter will return in spring, though they have done this dance countless times over countless ages, the grief is always fresh. She withdraws her blessing from the earth. Leaves turn colors, brilliant reds and golds and oranges, one last burst of beauty before they fall. Crops are harvested. Animals prepare for the lean times ahead. The world begins its slow descent into sleep. In the underworld, Hades welcomes his wife home. And despite everything, despite the fact that their union began with abduction and trickery, something resembling affection has grown between them over the ages. Hades is not cruel to Persephone. In his way, he loves her, respects her, honors her as his equal. And Persephone, who has learned to wield power in the realm of the dead, who judges souls and shows mercy and maintains order among the shades, has perhaps found a kind of purpose in her role as queen. She is no longer the innocent maiden picking flowers in a meadow. She has become something more complex, something that contains multitudes. She is both core and Persephone, both maiden and queen, both daughter and wife, both the spirit of spring and the lady of death. She exists in the liminal space between extremes, and perhaps that is where true wisdom lives. Above, Demeter counts the days until her daughter's return. She marks time by the dying of the year, by the first frost, by the winter solstice when the sun reaches its lowest point and begins its slow journey back toward warmth and light. She knows that each day that passes brings her closer to reunion. That winter, no matter how long and dark it seems, always ends. And when spring finally comes, when the sun grows stronger and the first green shoots push up through the half-frozen ground, Persephone ascends. She returns to her mother's arms, and the world explodes with joy. This is the true beginning of the year, the moment when life returns, when possibility opens, when everything that seemed dead proves that it was only sleeping. Flowers bloom, birds return from their winter migrations, animals emerge from hibernation. Everywhere there is the sense of renewal, of beginning again, of another chance. And at the center of it all is the reunion of mother and daughter, the ending of grief, the restoration of wholeness. But even in the midst of spring's joy, both goddesses know that autumn will come again. That separation is inevitable, that the cycle will continue, unchanging and eternal. This is the price of Persephone's transformation, the cost of the pomegranate seeds, the compromise that saved the world from eternal famine. Neither can fully have what they want, but both can survive the wanting, because they know it is not forever, just for a season, just for a time. Legacy of the myth. The story of Persephone's descent and return became one of the most important myths in ancient Greek culture, resonating across centuries and finding new meanings with each generation that told it. On its surface, it explains the seasons, why the earth blooms in spring and summer, but dies back in autumn and winter. But like all great myths, it contains depths beyond simple explanation. At its heart, the myth is about change and transformation. Persephone begins as Kore, the maiden, innocent and carefree, gathering flowers without a thought for anything beyond her immediate pleasure. But she is forced to grow up in the most traumatic way possible, stolen from everything she knows and loves, thrust into a role she never asked for. And yet, she survives. She adapts. She finds strength in herself that she never knew existed. She becomes a queen, not because she wanted to, but because circumstances demanded it. In this way, the myth speaks to every person who has been forced to change by trauma or loss. It acknowledges that growth often comes through pain, that transformation is rarely comfortable, that becoming who we are meant to be sometimes requires us to descend into our own personal underworlds. But it also promises that descent is not the end of the story, that we can return, that we can integrate what we learned in darkness and bring it back to the light. The myth is also about the bond between mothers and daughters, one of the strongest and most complex relationships that exists. Demeter's love for Persephone is absolute and all-consuming. When her daughter is taken, she is willing to destroy the world to get her back. This is the fierce protectiveness of maternal love, the way a mother will fight gods and fate itself for her child. But the myth also shows the necessary pain of separation, the reality that children must eventually leave their mothers, must become their own people, even if that leaving breaks both their hearts. For daughters, the myth offers validation of the complexity of growing up. Persephone loves her mother, but she also becomes something separate from her. She gains knowledge and power that Demeter does not have. She exists in a world her mother cannot enter. The relationship changes, becomes more equal, becomes a relationship between two adult women rather than parent and child. This transformation is necessary, but it is also painful for everyone involved. The myth speaks too about power and consent. Persephone was taken without her permission, given in marriage by her father without her mother's knowledge or her own agreement. This was, unfortunately, not uncommon in ancient Greek society, where women had little say in their own fates, where marriages were arranged by male relatives for political or economic reasons. The myth does not shy away from the violation inherent in the abduction. Persephone's cries, Demeter's rage, these things matter. The story acknowledges the wrong that was done, but it also shows that even from violation, even from trauma, something can be built. Persephone becomes a queen. She finds purpose in helping the dead, in showing mercy, in wielding power. This is not to say that the abduction was justified or good, but rather to acknowledge that survivors of trauma can find ways to transform their experience, to claim power from powerlessness, to make meaning from suffering. The pomegranate itself has become one of the most powerful symbols in Western culture, representing everything from fertility to death, to temptation, to forbidden knowledge. Those red seeds that Persephone ate, whether knowingly or unknowingly, bound her to the underworld, but also made her its queen. They represent the choice that is not really a choice, the action that changes everything. The threshold that once crossed can never be uncrossed. In later interpretations, some scholars have suggested that Persephone's eating of the pomegranate represents a sexual awakening, a transformation from maiden to woman. The fruit itself, with its many seeds, has long been associated with fertility and female sexuality. In this reading, Persephone's time in the underworld represents the necessary separation from the mother that allows a daughter to become a woman in her own right, to explore her own desires and power. The Greeks themselves saw deeper meanings in the myth. The Eleusinian mysteries, built around the story of Demeter and Persephone, promised initiates a better afterlife, some assurance that death was not the end. The myth became a teaching about the soul's journey, about the possibility of rebirth, about the hope that what seems lost might one day be found again. In a world where death was ever present, where lives were short and uncertain, this promise of continuity, of renewal, of reunion beyond the grave, was profoundly comforting. Philosophers found in the myth allegories for their own ideas. The Neoplatonists saw in Persephone's descent and return a representation of the soul's journey from the divine, through material existence, and back to union with the source. The annual cycle mirrored what they believed was the eternal cycle of the soul, falling into incarnation, learning and growing through experience in the physical world, then returning to the spiritual realm only to descend again. Artists and poets have returned to the myth again and again across millennia. From ancient Greek vase paintings showing the moment of abduction to Renaissance paintings exploring the emotional complexity of the reunion to modern retellings that center Persephone's own voice and agency, the story continues to fascinate and inspire. Each age finds in it something relevant to its own concerns, its own struggles with power, gender, loss, and transformation. In our modern world, the myth speaks perhaps more urgently than ever. We are living through our own kind of underworld descent, facing climate change, loss of biodiversity, the potential death of the natural world as we have known it. Like Demeter, we watch helplessly as something precious is stolen away. Like Persephone, we are forced to adapt to circumstances we did not choose and do not want. But the myth reminds us that cycles continue, that what descends can also return, that even in the darkest winter, spring is already being born. The other voices in the story. While Demeter and Persephone dominate the narrative, there are other figures whose roles deserve attention, characters who witness and participate in the great drama of the abduction and return. Their stories add texture and complexity to the central myth, showing how divine actions ripple out to affect all who exist in their shadow. Hecate, the mysterious goddess of crossroads and magic, plays a crucial role as witness and companion. She heard Persephone's cries on the day of the abduction, though she saw nothing of who took the maiden. In some versions, it is Hecate who goes searching with Demeter, carrying her own torch through the darkness, asking the same fruitless questions of every creature they encounter. And after the compromise is reached, after Persephone's dual existence is established, Hecate becomes a constant presence in the maiden's life. When Persephone descends to the underworld each year, Hecate walks before her, lighting the way with her torches, making the journey less frightening. And when Persephone returns to the surface world each spring, Hecate is there to greet her, to celebrate the renewal of life and light. She becomes, in essence, the guardian of transitions, watching over Persephone as she moves between her two worlds, her two identities, her two roles as maiden and queen. Hecate herself is a liminal goddess, belonging fully to neither the upper world nor the underworld, but existing in the spaces between. She is associated with night and darkness, with ghosts and necromancy, but also with protection and guidance. She stands at crossroads, those places where decisions must be made, where one path or another must be chosen. In this way, she perfectly embodies the themes of the Persephone myth: choice and change, darkness and light, the necessity of moving between different states of being. Helios, the all-seeing sun titan, provides the information that breaks Demeter's confusion and transforms it into focused rage. He sees everything that happens beneath the sky, all the actions of gods and mortals alike, because his daily journey in his sun chariot carries him over all the world. When Demeter and Hecate come to him seeking answers, he does not dissemble or protect the guilty. He tells the truth plainly. Hades took Persephone with Zeus's permission. In revealing this information, Helios risks the wrath of Zeus and Hades, but he does so anyway. Perhaps he feels sympathy for Demeter's plight. Perhaps he simply believes in the importance of truth. Or perhaps, as an older god, one of the titans who predated the Olympians, he feels less constrained by the political considerations that govern the newer gods. Whatever his motivation, his testimony is crucial. Without it, Demeter might have searched forever, never knowing where her daughter had gone or who was responsible. The Oceanids, those daughters of the ocean who were Persephone's companions when she was taken, suffer their own trauma from the event. They were right there, gathering flowers in the same meadow, and yet they heard nothing, saw nothing. In some versions of the myth, this is explicitly said to be Zeus's doing, that he prevented them from perceiving the abduction so that they could not interfere or even serve as witnesses. The guilt and confusion they must have felt, one moment playing with their friend, the next finding her simply vanished, haunts the edges of the story. Some traditions say that after Persephone's return, the Oceanids were less willing to wander far from the safety of the waters that were their home. The trauma of losing their companion, of failing to protect her, even though the failure was not their fault, left its mark. They become more cautious, more aware of the dangers that lurk in the world, even in meadows that seem safe and peaceful. Cyan, in some versions of the myth, plays a more active role than the other nymphs. She was a Sicilian water nymph who actually tried to stop Hades when he was carrying Persephone away. She rose up from her pool and blocked his path, pleading with him to let the maiden go, arguing that if he wanted to marry Persephone, he should ask Demeter's permission like any honorable suitor. But Hades was in no mood to be lectured by a minor nature spirit. He struck the ground with his scepter, and a chasm opened beneath Cyan's pool. All the water drained away into the underworld, and Cyan dissolved with it, her physical form destroyed by the power of the god she had dared to oppose. All that remained was a pool of water, which the locals said was made salty not by the sea, but by Cyane's tears, shed for the abducted maiden she had failed to save. Later, when Demeter was searching for Persephone, she passed by Cyane's pool. The nymph, now nothing but water and grief, could not speak to tell the goddess what had happened, but she did what she could. She caused Persephone's belt to float to the surface of the pool, a silent testimony to the violence that had occurred there. Demeter saw the belt, recognized it as her daughter's, and knew that Persephone had passed this way, though she still did not know who had taken her or where she had gone. Ascalaphus, whose fate we have already touched upon, represents the danger of bearing unwelcome truths. He saw Persephone eat the pomegranate seeds and reported this fact when it mattered most. For his honesty, he was transformed into an owl and trapped beneath a boulder. It is a cautionary tale about the perils of being a witness, about how speaking truth to power can result in punishment rather than reward. But Ascalaphus also represents something more complex. In revealing that Persephone had eaten in the underworld, he was not trying to hurt her or her mother. He was simply stating a fact, applying a law that existed long before any of them. The law was unjust, perhaps, but it was the law nonetheless. And yet, he suffered for it, caught in the machinery of divine politics and family drama, punished for being in the wrong place at the wrong time with knowledge that made things complicated. Triptolemus, the boy Demeter tried to make immortal, becomes a messenger of civilization itself. Though he could not be freed from death, Demeter gave him knowledge that would transform human existence. The art of agriculture, the understanding of how to cultivate wheat and other grains, how to plant and tend and harvest. This knowledge allowed humanity to settle in permanent communities, to build cities, to develop culture and technology and all the achievements of civilization. The serpent-drawn chariot Demeter gave him became the symbol of how sacred knowledge spreads through the world. Triptolemus traveled to every land, teaching whoever would listen. He showed kings and peasants alike how to honor the earth, how to work with the seasons, how to store grain against times of shortage. In some traditions, he was said to have taught the Athenians first, which is why Athens developed such close ties with Eleusis, and why Athenian citizens were given preferential treatment in the Eleusinian mysteries. The people of Eleusis themselves particularly the family of Celeus and Metaneira, become eternal beneficiaries of having shown hospitality to a goddess in disguise. Their city becomes the center of the most important mystery cult in the Greek world. Their descendants serve as priests and priestesses of the mysteries, holding positions of tremendous prestige and influence. What began as a simple act of kindness to a lost old woman transformed into a legacy that would last for 2,000 years. The underworld as kingdom and prison. To fully understand Persephone's experience, we must understand the realm she was taken to, the underworld that became both her kingdom and her cage. The Greeks called it Hades, after the god who ruled it, but they also called it Erebus, meaning darkness, or simply the house of Hades. It was not, in the Greek conception, a place of active torment for most souls, though certainly specific sinners suffered specific punishments. Rather, it was a place of diminishment, where the bright intensity of life faded into pale shadow. The journey to the underworld began with death itself. The soul, separating from the body, would find itself on the banks of the river Acheron, the river of woe. There, countless other souls gathered, confused and lost, waiting for Charon the ferryman to transport them across the water to the realm of the dead proper. But Charon did not work for free. The dead needed to pay him with a coin, traditionally placed in the mouth of the corpse at burial. Those who could not pay, either because they had not been buried properly or because their families were too poor to provide a coin, were condemned to wander the near shore of the Acheron for 100 years before they would be allowed to cross. This was why proper burial was so important to the Greeks. Why one of the worst things you could do to an enemy was to leave their body unburied, denying them passage to the afterlife. Once across the Acheron, souls encountered Cerberus, the three-headed hound who guarded the gates of the underworld. Cerberus was not there to keep souls out, but to keep them in. He allowed the dead to pass freely into Hades' realm, but he attacked viciously any who tried to leave. Each of his three heads represented a different aspect of time: past, present, and future, suggesting that once you entered the underworld, you were removed from the normal flow of temporal existence. Beyond Cerberus lay the judgment seats, where the three judges of the dead, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, sat in judgment of each soul. These had been kings in life, renowned for their wisdom and justice, and Zeus had appointed them to evaluate the lives of the dead and determine their fates. The judgment was not concerned with faith or belief, but with actions. How had you lived? Had you honored the gods? Had you been just to your fellow humans? Had you shown courage, wisdom, compassion? Based on this judgment, souls were sent to their appropriate destinations. The vast majority went to the Asphodel Meadows, the neutral zone of the underworld. There they wandered as shades, thin ghosts of their former selves, neither happy nor sad, but existing in a state of dim twilight consciousness. They remembered their lives, but as though from a great distance. All the sharp emotions and vivid experiences faded to gray uniformity. This was the common fate of common people, not a punishment, but simply the nature of death in the Greek worldview. The exceptional few might be sent to Elysium, also called the Elysian Fields, or the Isles of the Blessed. This was a place of genuine happiness, where the heroic dead feasted and fought and made love, and all the pleasures of life continued, but without any of life's pain or loss. Warriors who had died gloriously in battle, poets whose words had pleased the gods, those who had performed great deeds or shown exceptional virtue, these might hope for Elysium. It was as close as Greek religion came to a concept of heaven, though even Elysium was still part of the underworld, still separated from the world of the living. The worst sinners were sent to Tartarus, the deepest and darkest part of the underworld, as far below Hades as earth is below sky. There, those who had committed crimes against the gods themselves suffered eternal punishments tailored to their specific transgressions. Tantalus, who had killed his own son and served him as food to the gods to test their omniscience, stood forever in a pool of water beneath fruit-bearing branches. When he bent to drink, the water receded. When he reached for fruit, the branches pulled away. Thus, he suffered eternal hunger and thirst, tantalized by relief that could never come. Sisyphus, who had cheated death itself through clever tricks and lies, was condemned to push a boulder up a hill, only to have it roll back down just before he reached the top, forcing him to begin again in an endless cycle of futile labor. Ixion, who had tried to seduce Hera, Zeus's wife, was bound to a fiery wheel that spun forever through the darkness. The Danaids, 50 sisters who had murdered their husbands on their wedding night, were forced to draw water in jars with holes in them, the water forever draining away before they could fill them. These punishments were not just random cruelties, but mythological teachings about the consequences of particular sins. Tantalus's torment taught about the sin of hubris, of thinking oneself clever enough to deceive the gods. Sisyphus's endless labor illustrated the futility of trying to escape death. Ixion's wheel demonstrated the fate of those who coveted what belonged to the gods. The Danaids showed what happened to those who violated the sacred bonds of marriage and hospitality. This was the realm Persephone was brought to, a kingdom of shadows where the dead outnumbered the living by incalculable amounts, where time moved strangely, or perhaps did not move at all, where the warmth and light and vitality of the upper world were replaced by cool darkness and stillness, and the whispers of ghosts. For a maiden who had known only spring, only flowers and sunshine and laughter, it must have been almost incomprehensibly alien and frightening. And yet, she adapted. She learned to navigate this strange realm, to understand its rules and customs, to wield authority over the dead. In many ways, the underworld needed her. Hades was a just ruler, but a remote one, not given to mercy or compassion. The dead needed someone who could understand their fears and sorrows, someone who had herself experienced loss and transformation, someone who could show kindness to the confused souls arriving in this strange place. Persephone became that figure. She walked among the dead, not as a distant authority, but as a compassionate presence. She listened to their stories, heard their regrets, sometimes intervened on behalf of those she felt deserved mercy. She became, in her own right, a power in the underworld, respected and even loved by the shades who dwelt there. In later myths, heroes who descended to the underworld while still living, Orpheus seeking his dead wife, Heracles capturing Cerberus as one of his labors, Odysseus seeking prophecy from the shade of Tiresias. Often it was Persephone who showed them kindness, who helped them accomplish their quests, who interceded with Hades on their behalf. She retained her compassion even in the realm of the dead, remained connected to life and love even while ruling over death. The deeper meanings in agricultural ritual. The connection between Persephone's story and the agricultural cycle goes deeper than simple explanation of why plants grow and die with the seasons. The Greeks, who depended absolutely on agriculture for survival, understood growing food as a sacred act, a partnership between humans and the divine forces that governed the earth. Planting seeds in the ground was, in a sense, a ritual reenactment of Persephone's descent. The seed must be buried in darkness, must die to its existence, as a seed in order to transform into something new. It must spend time in the cold earth, hidden from the sun, undergoing mysterious changes that human eyes cannot see. And then, in spring, it rises again, pushing up into the light, transformed, no longer a seed, but a plant with the potential to bear fruit. This cycle of burial and resurrection, of descent and return, of death and new life, was central to how the Greeks understood not just agriculture, but existence itself. Everything that lives must die. But death is not the end. From death comes new life. The seed that dies in autumn becomes the grain that feeds the people the following summer. The leaves that fall and rot become the rich soil that nourishes the next generation of trees. The Thesmophoria, a festival celebrated by Greek women in honor of Demeter, included a ritual that made this connection explicit. Women would take piglets, symbols of fertility, and cast them into sacred chasms in the earth. The bodies of these animals would be left there to decompose, mixing with the soil. Later, women would descend into the chasms and retrieve the rotted remains, which would then be mixed with seeds before planting. The death of the pigs, their descent into the earth, their transformation into fertility-giving substance, echoed Persephone's journey and ensured the success of the crops. The timing of agricultural work was tied directly to Persephone's movements. Planting happened in autumn, when Persephone descended to the underworld. The seeds went into the ground at the same time the maiden went beneath it. Through winter, both remained hidden. Both underwent transformation in darkness. And in spring, when Persephone returned, the plants emerged as well, green shoots pushing up toward the light, toward reunion with the sun. Harvest festivals celebrated not just the gathering of crops, but Demeter's joy at having her daughter back. The abundance of summer was the goddess's happiness made tangible, her blessing flowing freely because she was reunited with what she loved most. And the gradual decline toward autumn was Demeter's growing sadness as the time of separation approached, her blessing slowly withdrawing as her grief increased. This understanding of agriculture as sacred drama meant that farmers were not simply workers but participants in divine ritual. Every action in the field, from turning the soil to planting seeds to harvesting grain, was imbued with religious significance. The farmer was helping to enact the cycle that kept the cosmos in balance, was ensuring that Persephone's sacrifice, her descent into darkness, was not in vain, but bore fruit that would sustain life. The Eleusinian mysteries, at their core, taught this cycle and its deeper meanings. Initiates learned that they, like seeds, like Persephone herself, would descend into darkness. Death was inevitable for all, but descent was not destruction, it was transformation. And just as surely as spring followed winter, just as reliably as seeds sprouted into new plants, so too would the human soul find renewal after death. This promise was not based on blind faith, but on observed reality. The initiates could see the cycle playing out every year in the fields around them. They understood it viscerally, in their bones, because they worked with it constantly. The mysteries simply helped them apply that understanding to the great question of human mortality, to find in the agricultural cycle a pattern that could give meaning and hope to the inevitability of death. The transformation of Persephone. Perhaps the most profound aspect of the myth is not what happens to Persephone, but what Persephone becomes through what happens to her. She begins as Kore, the maiden, a figure of innocence and potential, youth frozen in a perfect moment before experience complicates and corrupts. But that stasis, however beautiful, is not sustainable. Growth requires change, and change requires some form of loss. Persephone's abduction is violent, traumatic, a violation of her autonomy and innocence. There is no minimizing this truth. She did not choose to be taken. She did not consent to marriage with Hades. She was a victim of divine politics and male power, treated as property to be traded between her father and her future husband. This aspect of the myth reflects the real experiences of women in ancient Greece, who often had no say in their own marriages, who were passed from father to husband without their consent ever being sought. But the myth does something more than simply reflect this reality. It also shows what can emerge from even the most traumatic circumstances. Persephone, over time, becomes more than a victim. She becomes a queen. She gains power and authority. She learns to navigate a realm that initially terrified her. She finds purpose in helping the dead, in showing mercy, in wielding the considerable influence that comes with her position. This transformation does not erase the wrong done to her. It does not justify the abduction or make it right. But it does suggest that survivors of trauma can find ways to reclaim power, to build meaningful lives even from terrible beginnings. Persephone does not remain frozen in the moment of her violation. She grows, changes, becomes something new. Her dual nature, maiden and queen, spring and death, reflects a profound truth about human experience. We are not single, simple things. We contain multitudes. We can be innocent and experienced, vulnerable and powerful, joyful and sorrowful, all at once. We move between different aspects of ourselves depending on context and need. And we are shaped by our experiences, especially our difficult experiences, in ways that become integral to who we are. The pomegranate seeds, whether eaten knowingly or unknowingly, become the symbol of this transformation. They bind Persephone to the underworld, yes, but they also make her its queen. They force her into a dual existence, split between two worlds. But that split also gives her a unique perspective, a unique power. She becomes the only being who truly belongs to both light and darkness, life and death, earth and underworld. In psychological terms, Persephone's journey can be read as a necessary descent into the shadow self, the parts of ourselves we typically deny or hide. We all have an underworld within us, places of darkness and fear and repressed experience. The journey to wholeness requires that we descend into those places, confront what we find there, integrate it into our conscious understanding of ourselves. We cannot remain forever innocent, forever untouched by darkness. To be fully human requires embracing all aspects of ourselves, light and shadow both. Persephone's annual return from the underworld suggests that this integration is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. We must continually revisit our inner darkness, continually work to maintain balance between different aspects of self. And we must allow for cycles in our own lives, times of outward growth and activity balanced with times of inward reflection and rest, times of light balanced with times of darkness. The relationship between Persephone and Hades evolves in interesting ways across different versions and later interpretations of the myth. In some tellings, she never forgives him for the abduction, remains forever resentful of her forced marriage. In others, something like love grows between them, not the passionate romance of maiden and youth, but a deep partnership between equals who rule together with complementary strengths. Hades, for all his faults, does treat Persephone as a true queen. He shares power with her, respects her judgments, allows her to show mercy where he would show only justice. And Persephone, perhaps, comes to appreciate certain aspects of her role. She has escaped the eternal innocence that was her mother's plan for her, has gained knowledge and power that she never could have achieved if she had remained simply Kore, the maiden picking flowers. The annual cycle of separation and reunion with her mother reflects another truth about growth and maturity. Children must separate from their parents to become fully themselves. This separation is painful for both parent and child, but it is necessary. Demeter must learn to let go, to accept that Persephone has her own life, her own identity beyond being simply Demeter's daughter. And Persephone must establish herself as independent, as someone who exists in her own right, rather than merely as an extension of her mother. But the cycle also shows that separation does not mean abandonment. Persephone returns. Mother and daughter reunite. The bond between them, though tested and transformed, endures. They learn to maintain relationship across distance and difference. To love each other, not despite their separate existences, but because of the richness those separate existences bring to their time together. In many ways, Persephone becomes the most interesting character in the myth precisely because she changes so much, because she contains such contradictions, because she refuses to be reduced to a single, simple identity. She is both victim and victor, both stolen and choosing, both maiden and mature woman, both her mother's daughter and her husband's wife, both the life-giving spirit of spring and the awesome queen of the dead. As we come to the end of this exploration of Persephone's descent, we find ourselves where all good myths leave us, at a beginning rather than an ending. Because the story of Persephone is not finished, it continues, repeating itself every year in the cycle of the seasons, repeating itself in the lives of everyone who experiences loss and transformation, descent and return. Tonight, wherever you are in the world, you are in some phase of Persephone's cycle. Perhaps you are in the fullness of summer, reunited with what you love, experiencing abundance and joy. Perhaps you are in autumn, watching something precious begin to slip away, feeling the approach of loss. Perhaps you are in the depth of winter, separated from what sustains you, waiting in darkness for spring's return. Or perhaps you are in spring itself, experiencing the relief and joy of reunion, of return, of life emerging once more from dormancy. Wherever you are in the cycle, the myth offers wisdom. If you are in joy, treasure it, knowing it will not last forever, but is no less precious for its transience. If you are in grief, endure it, knowing it will not last forever. That spring follows winter as surely as breath follows breath. If you are in transition, moving from one state to another, honor the difficulty of that passage, the courage it takes to let go of one thing to reach for another. The ancient Greeks who first told this story, who made it central to their understanding of existence, who built mysteries around it that persisted for 2,000 years, they understood something we are still learning, that life is not a straight line, but a spiral, that we return again and again to the same themes, the same challenges, the same joys and sorrows, but each time at a different level, with different wisdom, transformed by all the cycles that came before. Demeter and Persephone still walk among us, not as literal beings but as archetypal forces, as patterns of experience that repeat themselves endlessly. Every mother who loves fiercely and must learn to let go is Demeter. Every child who must leave safety and descend into challenge and emerge transformed is Persephone. Every reunion after separation echoes their spring joy. Every parting echoes their autumn grief. The earth still keeps their rhythm. Seeds still descend into darkness and rise transformed. Leaves still fall and return. The cycle continues, unstoppable, eternal, the physical manifestation of a divine truth, that nothing is lost forever, that transformation is always possible, that descent contains within it the promise of return. So as we conclude this telling of one of humanity's oldest and most powerful stories, take with you whatever resonates, whatever speaks to your own experience. Perhaps it is Demeter's fierce love. Perhaps it is Persephone's courage in darkness. Perhaps it is simply the reminder that cycles continue, that winter ends, that what seems lost can be found again. And if you found something of value in this exploration, if these ancient words spoke to something in your modern life, consider leaving a like on this video and subscribing to Dreams of the Gods. Let me know in the comments which part of Persephone's story resonates most with you, which character you connect with, what insights you found in this descent into myth. Your engagement helps these old stories find new life, helps keep the cycle of telling and retelling alive. The story of Persephone's descent is never really finished. It begins again with each telling, with each person who hears it and finds in it some truth about their own life. It begins again with each spring, each reunion, each return from darkness to light. And it will continue, long after we are gone, as long as there are mothers and daughters, as long as there are seasons, as long as there are those who seek meaning in the eternal cycles of loss and recovery, death and rebirth, descent and return. Sleep well, and may your own descents be followed always by return, your winters by spring, your darkness by light. The complete story of Persephone's descent. There are moments in myth when the world holds its breath, when a single choice, a single flower plucked from the earth, changes everything. Tonight, we descend into one such moment, into the story of a maiden who became a queen, a mother's love that nearly destroyed the world, and the eternal cycle that would come to explain the very seasons themselves.